let's get down to business. You're the chairman of the British Monarchist Society. Now, please, just for the sake of introduction, tell the viewers what the BMS is and how did that start and what is it that it does?
Well, Alistair, it's funny, that's a loaded question because the BMS was never supposed to be what it is. It was really, in 2009, a grouping of like-minded individuals on Facebook that wanted to educate about the Crown, about the Union, and everything that comes with Her Majesty's position as a constitutional aspect. And we grew and we grew to the point where I said, well, if we want to really be effective, we need to come off of an online platform. We actually need to work in society if we want to change it for the better. So we actually incorporated properly on paper during 2012 the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. So we're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. So with that, what we do is we focus on education. We're not a fan club. We're not, oh, we love what Kate wore, and oh, did you see what the First Minister did? She didn't curtsy properly at the tea party at Holyrood. We don't do that sort of thing. We look at the constitutional aspect of Her Majesty and successors within government in actual relation to her place, not only in England and Wales, but also Northern Ireland and Scotland, because we can't forget that she is the Queen of Scotland as well, and the Union plays a very big part in what we do. So for us to educate about the British Crown, that also includes the Act of Union under Queen Anne. So it's so important that we understand how the Union came to be, because without it, we wouldn't have the British monarchy, really. So that's what we do. We are an educational-based organisation, Alistair.
Fantastic. Well, that's absolutely right up our street because we're the same as far as those things go. It's all about educating people about it. And, you know, this is the United Kingdom. It's not the United Republic. And some of our unionist people, and I understand where they're coming from, they go, oh, you can still have, you know, the monarchy is not intrinsic to the union, etc., etc. But really today it absolutely is intrinsic to the union. And this, who realises that the most? The Scottish nationalists realise it the most. And if they were to ever get their way, they would try to move society in such a way that they would try to get a referendum to try to chuck out the Scottish monarchy and so on and so forth. And historically, they're totally in the wrong because Scotland's always been a monarchy. As we always say, during the period of the interregnum, after Charles I was cruelly murdered, basically within a week, the Scots declared his son to be King of Great Britain. Not King of Scotland, King of Great Britain. So I always say, you know, Britain's always had a monarchy, albeit, you know, disputed during that particular period. And so the Scots have always been monarchists. And of course, all that whole conflict during what we call the British Civil War was based upon, it wasn't against the Crown as such. Even the Covenanters were monarchists. And it was just that the king wasn't, for them, religious enough, basically. There was never any conflict that we shouldn't have a monarchy. I mean, the monarchy was always just considered to be an absolute certainty, whether you were an official Scottish Royalist or a Scottish Covenanter. Like the fact of the monarchy was central to it. So that's such an important thing to educate about as well.
It is, and this is the thing, because being born in the United States, I've now lived most of my life outside of America than I did inside, but I was born under a republic. And I know the trappings of politics. I know that in such as the case of the United States of America, the government doesn't answer to anyone. There isn't one pinnacle factoring person who is above politics like the United Kingdom, whereas Her Majesty sits above all of that and says, look, I am here as Queen of the people, not Queen of a party, not King of a party, the people. And the government of the day actually answers to me. So there's something higher, there's something above politics. And coming from the United States and continuing to watch what happens in that republic, Alistair, it makes me so sad when separatists want to say, right, we're going to have our independence and then we're going to have a a plebiscite on getting rid of the monarchy, and we can have, President Sturgeon. And I'm like, oh, that's a very dangerous road, because you're not coming up with something that is better. And if you really think that usurping the power of the crown by a politician is going to be better than actually making the government of the day answerable to someone, one being, you're sadly mistaken, because that's what we have everywhere else in the world. We have politicians' playgrounds. And what we have in the United Kingdom and the 15 other realms and a very small handful of other countries in the world with constitutional monarchy, it's sort of an exclusive club, if you will, but one that works for the people. And it shouldn't, the crown shouldn't be known for the power it has. It should be known for the power it denies others, such as overzealous politicians who wish to usurp that power for themselves and their party, which will always push unity to the brink. Because once politics are involved, as you know, it divides us, whereas the monarchy and the crown under Her Majesty unites us.
Yes. Yes. Oh, absolutely. I agree. And something I like about it, and maybe you know more about this, but it used to be, and I hope it still is, the case that the PM has to have a weekly audience with the crown. Is that still something that happens? It
is. They became a little more infrequent under Mr. Blair. He was just very busy, I guess. But the current Prime Minister, he still meets with Her Majesty. They used to be on Tuesdays. They have been moved around a little bit depending on what's happened. I think this past week, it's today. Today's Wednesday. So the meeting is happening with the Prime Minister and Her Majesty today. But all successive Prime Ministers have always had weekly audiences with Her Majesty. It's just the way it is because of her duty to the country. She has the right to advise, the right to counsel, the right to warn, and that's what she does.
That's right, and it's a weekly reminder to whoever is the Prime Minister that they're not actually top of the tree. They're not actually, they've got to answer to somebody, even if that person politically doesn't have, the strong political power over them. Nevertheless, it's a reminder that they're not the only dog in this game. They're not the only person in the game. So it keeps them, it keeps the head on their shoulders, as it were.
It does,
which I think is good.
Well, that title, Prime Minister, because there's so many other ministers in the cabinet, but he's the head minister, since the name Prime Minister. But at the end of the day, he is the first minister of which he sits in Her Majesty's government. He's not the Prime Minister until the Queen invites him to form a government in her name. So this is what a lot of people don't understand, is that she's not just a figurehead, and she has real power according to our Constitution. And it's very interesting when you look at her right now, because if I was her, I would have called up the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition and said, right, you two, get it together, because the example that you're doing, the tit for tat's not working for me, it's not working for the government, sort yourselves. But she has the power to do that. And we can't forget, Alistair, that just because we haven't seen Her Majesty use any of her real powers over the last 70 years, doesn't mean that they're not there to be used. And this is a danger with our lovely, fantastic Queen, is that she's not had the need to actually exercise those powers. So some people will argue, well, now there's a precedent set that a monarch cannot and should not use those powers, when in fact that's a very dangerous slippery slope, because those powers truly are there for the monarch, regardless whether they exercise them or not. So that's where I think the rise of, Her Majesty's just a figurehead comes from. And that statement cannot be furthest from the truth.
Yes, good points. Good points. Now, were you down at Parliament yesterday when it was the state opening of Parliament? What was going on there? Do you have any thoughts on what you were doing yesterday?
Well, we made history yesterday, and I was there covering it for a few different international networks. And I heard so many people, other pundits and just other people say, oh, the Queen is not here and it's such a sad day. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, she's not here, but we can't forget, this is a 96-year-old woman in full-time employment. So,
absolutely.
And her mobility is questioned. So there are limitations. And okay, being British, we understand and we say, right, with your life comes fantastic privilege and wealth, and we understand how that is, but you will work until your last day, and she is going to make good on that contract that she did. But what we had yesterday was very special. It was the first time Prince Charles has actually stepped in as a de facto monarch. Okay, it's not a regency, there's nothing going on there, but we had a glimpse into the future of this country. We had a glimpse into what the monarchy is going to be when Her Majesty is no longer with us. And of course, it's sad. She's always been there. She's the only sovereign you've known, I've known, probably most of your viewers have ever known. But we have to be realist royalists here, Alistair, and say, you know what, eventually the sun does set, but that doesn't mean it doesn't come up another day on something that could be even better. So what we saw,
right.
Oh, I'm so sorry, but what we saw yesterday was a very big piece of history, and I think the people of Wales were watching very keenly to see, well, wait a minute, this is the Prince of Wales who is now actually bearing the torch. That title of Prince of Wales for the people of that country, I think, have something very, very interesting to be proud of, because they are directly involved in what happened yesterday, as we all are. Now, imagine if the prince had used his Scottish title when he had gone into Parliament yesterday. So you have the Duke of Rothesay saying the Queen's speech on her behalf and all of this. Now, if they would have referred to him, the BBC here in London, when we watched, if they would have referred to him by his Scottish title, I think Scots people really would have had their ears perk up as well and say, hey, that's our Duke. That's our Prince as well. We're making history today. And I think just using one title south of the border as the Prince of Wales, because we don't really call him the Duke of Cornwall here. But I think for people north of the border who know him as the Duke, I think if we looked at a different title down here versus where you are, it would have a very different meaning to people north of the border to see him referred to on national television as his Scottish title. Yeah.
I absolutely agree, and in fact, I did hear the SNP fellow Ian Blackford, the leader of the SNP, he did actually refer to Prince Charles as the Duke of Rothesay, which I was quite touched by. I thought it was quite nice that he's doing that, and again, that would prick up people's ears, because it certainly pricked up my ears. Yeah, it absolutely.
And I'll tell you a little fun bit, Alistair, because I was on Sky News, literally just following him, what was it, a fortnight ago, on the Queen's birthday, the 21st. And the presenter was so funny, because she said, right, now, Mr. Blackford, thank you as always. And now we're going to, Thomas, oh, and she went back to him and said, now, Mr. Blackford, I'm sure you of all people would like to wish Her Majesty a very happy 96th birthday. And he was so gracious with it. Of course, I'd like to wish her a happy birthday. And he's a very good sport. I know his leanings, and I know how he feels about the monarchy, but I do have to say that even though politically I don't agree with him, he's always shown respect to the head of state and her heirs and successors. And I do give a lot of credit for that. So it was just a funny little quip, because I was practically in stitches before going on live, trying to contain myself. And I'm like, did she really just do that to him?
Good. Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it. But I thought that Prince Charles was looking quite regal, actually, with his... whatever uniform that was that he was wearing. It certainly, as you say, it gives a glimpse into the future. And certainly that's something to be grateful for. As you mentioned, like, the great thing about monarchy is it doesn't end. It just keeps going on. And I think when Her Majesty's father died, the media had said, the king dies but Britain lives on. And a new hand takes the wheel of state, which I thought that's really good and
well, that's what we saw yesterday, Alistair. We saw the Queen very much still alive, with the crown placed where it was, and we saw Prince Charles look and observe that crown. But when we saw him walk in, behind him in that fantastic photograph of him with the Duchess of Cornwall, the Duchess of Rothesay, and then Prince William behind them. Again, that picture is so integral to the continuity of the British crown, because it shows the line, it shows what's coming, it shows the hereditary aspect. So we didn't just get a glimpse of who is coming to the throne. We saw continuity, and those are the very aspects of what keeps this union together, is something there as an anchor that shows us in perpetual continuity, and it's so important.
Perpetual continuity, that's absolutely right. Now, you do many things with the British Monarchist Society, and one of the things that you've done, and this is very interesting and very praiseworthy, is you have put together a couple of pieces of music. Now, we'll give people the where to acquire it, but first, can you just tell us what this is all about and what is it that you've done here?
This is, I always want to educate. And the way I thought we could do that and set ourselves apart when I found out that the BBC wasn't doing an anthem this year, such as they did in 2012 with Gary Barlow, I said, let's jump on that. So literally a year and a half ago, I said, right, let me get people together. We're going to write an anthem. But I have a dilemma, Alistair. How do I put 70 years of a reign in 96 years of a life into 4.5 minutes of song? So if I'm going to do an anthem that needs to have all the pomp and pageantry and circumnavigate the world of where Her Majesty has touched and set foot in actually as queen to 15 countries, but also go internally, how do I represent Scotland and Wales, Northern Ireland and England? How do I represent this kingdom? So I said, right, if Taylor Swift can put out an 11.5-minute song, why can't I? But we didn't make it continuous. We broke it down. So I literally went to some of our patrons, Dr. Olga Thomas, who is the resident composer at Crew's Bereavement Care, of which Her Majesty is patron. But also she's the private composer to Her Majesty and the royal family. And she's a friend of mine and also a patron of the BMS. And I said, Dr. Thomas, I said, I want to do this. Help me. And she goes, right. And she has a fantastic ability to just hear things in her mind and create it. So she would phone me at 1 and 2 in the morning and say, I've had a thought, and here I am, literally head on my pillow, bang, bang, bang on the keyboard. And I'm like, that sounds great. It sounds great. And then I would think about it and I'd let it set in and I'd phone her back 20 minutes later. I say, right. So that's symbolic of a slow march. If we look at the Scots Guard, I can see them coming down the mall to this and all of that. And I said, right, but you want to deal with just instrumental. I want to hark back to the coronation. I want exaltations. I want Vivat Regina, all of these things. So I said, right, let me go to Leslie Garrett, CBE, who is the UK's most well-known soprano. She had her own BBC show for years. And I said, right, let me talk to some other people and let's go after Rodney Earl Clark, who is starring right now in Les Mis on the West End. And he was the first black British opera singer to actually sing God Save the Queen, the national anthem at Twickenham. Fantastic. Right. And then I said, how do we make this even better? Well, let's go to the London Community Gospel Choir, who is just absolutely renowned internationally all over the world, and they're currently performing on Britain's Got Talent. So we all went to the studio with this piece. And what came out, just the power of this song, it's Elgar-esque, it brings you right back to the coronation, but in a modern way. And you can see all of the vistas of the palace, the abbey, the guards, everything. And that's what we wanted.
Fantastic.
But then I said, we need to do something else because we are circumnavigating the United Kingdom, but we can't leave out the realms. We can't leave out the 54 nations of the Commonwealth. We've got to do something. So I said to one of my really good friends, who is a well-known opera singer and producer in South Africa, who was living here at the time. This was all during lockdown, mind you. So our Zoom calls were just hours and hours and hours. And thank God Zoom had suspended that 40-minute time frame that we had. And Anton Vandermeer, just a fantastic talent. I sat with him for days and days, literally tens of man hours, going through all the notes. How do I do 70 years of this reign? How do I do 96 years of life? I want to take the imagery. I want to show the Queen's unblemished face, her maturing face. I want to talk about duty. I want to talk about everything that she has done. And we talk about the Union. And we feature Scotland. And it's so important because we all know she's woke every day by a bagpiper. What is more iconic than bagpipes. So, of course, we have bagpipes that introduce the Scotland section. We've got the Irish flute for Northern Ireland, all of these things. But this is a circumnavigation musically around the world, and it touches everyone who is a subject of Her Majesty. But I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's not people who are just a subject of Her Majesty. She is the world's queen, Alistair. There's other queen regnants, but when you say the queen to anyone in the world,
absolutely,
they can point to Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom and say the queen.
Yes.
They all know who
Yes.
we're talking about. So what we created were two fantastic tracks that are going to rival anything that we've put out. And when you look at when we debuted on the Queen's birthday, at number 1 and number 2 on the iTunes classical chart, and number 27 on the iTunes top 100, it was just fantastic. We had actually, in fine style, on the eve of Her Majesty's birthday, had a live performance of this with Leslie and Rodney at the Rubens Hotel, and we had all of our MPs and lords there. Baroness Hooper was there. We had some other members, private members of the royal family were there, members of the royal household, high commissioners of Her Majesty's realms. And Alistair, giving this gift to Her Majesty, it's not just for the Jubilee, it is a thank you. And that second song is called Your Majesty, We Thank You from Our Hearts. And this is heartfelt. It is the thought and everything that's gone into the verses to say, this isn't just for your Jubilee. This is celebrating you as 70 years of Queen of this nation. And God forbid, when she is no longer with us, this song will still be just as prevalent because it's a reflection on her life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I've listened to both pieces of music, and I can certainly recommend them as very stirring. And there you are. Hold up that CD again. And while you're holding it up, I'll just say you can download that from iTunes, or you can purchase the CD, or you can purchase a luxury edition of the CD, which I believe is signed by Leslie Garrett and so on.
It's signed by all the artists.
Yes, good. And you can do that at the JubileeAnthem2022.com. That's the JubileeAnthem2022.com. It has links to the iTunes, to other streaming platforms, and to buy that CD, or to buy the signed copies of
there's
the CD.
2 CDs. There's the luxury limited edition, which is all signed, and then you have just the unlimited print run, which is the one I had held up. Right. There aren't many left of the limited edition, but if they get the limited edition, the Queen got number 1, Prince Charles got one, and the Duchess of Cornwall got one as well.
Quite right,
so
quite right.
Yeah, there was only 67 by the time we were done giving them to the principal people in the crown. So yes,
great, well done, Thomas.
Thank you.
We've come to the conclusion of this interview. There, I just want to say well done for all that work that you've put in, especially for that music, but also for the educational work that the British Monarchist Society does. And here on your website is the Monarchists.com, and you're also on Facebook and also on Twitter at the Monarchists,
and Instagram
as well, and under the Monarchists.
Yes.
So that's a really good organisation that's dedicated to promoting the British monarchy, not only here in the United Kingdom but also worldwide. So we must have you on again, Thomas.
I'd love to come back. This is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good, and you've got a good setup there, and
Thank you.
It's absolutely perfect broadcasting tonight for us. Sorry about the wee hitch there at the start. That was my bad. So I'll say good night.
I repel technology, so it was probably my fault.
Yeah, I know. I think we all do, but we have to sort of deal with it. Okay, well, I'll say good night to you, and
Lovely.
God bless, and God save the Queen.
You as well, Alistair. Thank you very much, and strong to the Union.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.